fine art, usually it's modern art that we're showing, but obviously you can already see in this room it's much more older historical works. But as we move through the 4 rooms, the styles are going to change very much. So the reason that is because this exhibition is called Championing Irish Art, and it's the personal connection of Alan and Mary Hobart, who owned a gallery in London called Pym's Gallery, and they were by far the most successful gallery promoting Irish art abroad. And this was through very, very difficult times when Ireland was in civil war. So they opened their gallery in 1978 in London, and this was exactly at the time when the Troubles was happening in Ireland. There was a lot of bombings and war happening up in the north, so it was actually very difficult for them to promote Irish art, but they were extremely successful at it. So in this room there's a lot of history and politics, which I'll explain to you, just beginning with this portrait. So this portrait, rather than being the name of the lady that's in the portrait, it's called Young Ireland. And it's by Ireland's most famous artist called William Orpin. I don't know if any of you heard of William Orpin. So this is a portrait of Grace Gifford. Has anybody heard of Grace Gifford?
Yes.
So it's quite beautiful actually that the curator placed this portrait here, because she's facing out this way, and if you know the history of this area, the main jail is just at the back here. So the famous story about Grace Gifford is that she married her husband Joseph Plunkett, who was the leader of the 1916 Easter Rising. She married him 7 hours before he was executed in Kilmainham jail. So the curator specifically put the portrait here, so she's kind of facing her husband's jail. So the interesting story there is Grace Gifford was actually a painter herself, an illustrator, and she was one of William Orpin, so this is William Orpin's work here. She was one of his students, so he was teaching her in Dublin. He said of her that she was one of the best students that he had, and he went on to paint her. It's a very lively painting, as you can see. And she has this kind of mischievous look in her eyes, and she certainly was kind of a mischievous person. After she married Joseph Plunkett, she never married again. And the interesting thing about her background politically was that she was from a unionist family, and she was Protestant, but she converted to Catholicism, and she was very staunchly Republican. Obviously, she married Joseph Plunkett from the leading the 1916 Rising. The thing about Grace Gifford is that after the Rising, when the treaty talks were happening in London, I don't know if you know any about that history, so this is where they were talking about whether to give Ireland independence or not. This was all being debated in the House of Lords just here. When they did decide to give Ireland independence, but it meant that Ireland was divided. So you were pro-treaty or anti-treaty. If you were anti-treaty, it meant that you didn't agree with Ireland being divided at all. So she was anti-treaty. Even though the treaty went ahead, she was anti-treaty. And it meant that she was actually jailed herself for 3 months in Kilmainham jail up there. And she was also socially ostracised. So she found it very difficult to make a living. She made a very small living as an illustrator. And also she was unable to collect the pension because of her political ideals. After her husband was killed, she couldn't get the widow's pension or anything like that, so she had a pretty tough time for a long time. So yeah, that's Grace Gifford by William Orpin. Then we can maybe move over to this William Orpin painting. So William Orpin was one of those kind of child prodigies where he was born in Dublin.